Welcome to our Living Stones podcast, where we gather to discuss all matters of faith and life as members of God's household. In a world that often leaves us feeling fragmented and disconnected, our hope is that Living Stones will help to further connect us as we pursue the Lord together. I'm your host, Shiyoung, and in today's podcast, we'll be addressing the joys and the struggles of living in Nova as a Christian. And I want to thank Pastor Paul.
Hello.
Davina.
Hi.
And our first-time guest, Han.
Hello.
Today.
Thanks for having me.
Welcome. We have a solid panel today, so I'm excited for the discussion ahead. So I guess the best way to, start this discussion is to ask you guys, how long have you lived in Nova? Each of you guys. Let's start with Han.
I would consider myself a native Novavian.
Novain.
Yeah. Pretty much born and raised here. I did the whole my entire church experience is specific to Nova Korean American immigrant churches. Sunday school, did the whole youth group thing. I was very involved with serving at retreats through our college and stuff. But then for a period of 9 to 10 years, I would say, just to kind of make it even, for a decade, I did go out to Illinois, so the Chicagoland area, and I was able to also be heavily involved in ministry there, both in a non-pastoral capacity, but also in a pastoral capacity as well. And then recently moved back to Nova as an adult, sometime around 2018.
Okay.
So been here since then.
Wow. So it's been five
Pretty much, yeah.
6 years.
5,
since you've
6
been
years.
back. Okay. So you've had good exposure to Nova life. How about you, Dav?
I have also been here basically my whole life. I was born in California.
You
I-
were?
Yeah.
I didn't know that.
It's such a random thing.
That's-
But I was there for only a year, and my parents drove right back to Virginia. So I have been here my whole life, just like Han. I grew up in the church here in the Korean American context, and so for me, I've just been totally exposed to this area my whole life.
Okay. So you have really good exposure to Nova
Yep.
life and culture as well. Okay. How about you, Pastor Paul?
I mean, I consider myself a Northern Virginia now, having lived here for 14 or so years. But I lived in other places. Obviously, I think we just concluded another podcast sharing my life testimony. So I was born in St. Louis. Okay, lived in Kentucky for a few years, and then the Philly area. We did a pit stop through Fairfax, so there's brief exposure there. And then I lived in Korea, Seoul, Korea, for 10 years. Lived in Champaign-Urbana for a year. Did my college years, undergrad in Massachusetts, and then back to Philly for 8 years or so. And then 2009, moved to Centerville. So
Best city on earth.
Centerville, yeah.
Okay. So you moved here when you were more or less an adult and as a pastor. So
Yes,
you'll have a
yes.
bit of a different perspective. Just as a reference, I was born and raised in Korea, lived in Chicago my childhood years, and then I moved to Virginia freshman year of high school, went to Westfield.
Oh, fun fact. Shiyoung and I went to high school together.
That's
Same
correct.
Graduating
Wait,
class.
I went to Westfield too.
Wow. You did?
No, you did not.
I did just my senior year.
Oh.
Okay. Go,
Okay, got
go,
the Westfield connection.
go
Wow.
Bulldogs.
Yeah.
Yeah, go Bulldogs. Wow, that's good to know. So, the follow-up question I want to ask you guys, based on your experience in Nova, is what is unique about Nova in terms of its characteristics, just as a region. And I'll kind of open up the mic, open up the floor to any of you guys here. What's unique? What sets Nova apart from some of the other places that you've experienced?
So I'll go first because I feel like I am the only non-pastorish person here.
Mhm.
I have actually traveled a lot.
Mhm.
I forgot to mention I lived in Korea for a year, and I've just been kind of a nomad. Even though my base has always been Nova,
Mm.
I've traveled a lot. California, Texas, Connecticut. I've been to India many times, and I share this because I have to say, out of all the places that I've traveled to, whether it's a first world country or third world, something that sticks out for Nova is our cleanliness. I feel like even when I love going out to LA,
Yeah.
there is something that stands out about the cleanliness of Northern Virginia. Whether you walk into a store or like even within your own home, even if the homes are older, there is just something so kind of nice and clean about
Mm.
Nova. I'll also say that Nova in general has such a great versatility when it comes to food and just different cultures in general.
Yeah.
And so, although I know that racism exists everywhere, I feel like where we are, I mean, where I am specifically in Centerville, Virginia, we're kind of cushioned within our culture here too. So, those are like the first, just kind of very shallow, typical things that I feel like most, especially Asian Americans that live in Nova,
Mm.
can think of.
Yeah. And my mom recently moved here from Chicago after living there for 20 years. First thing she says is the roads are really nice.
Yeah.
The roads are nice. I noticed that right away, but I also noticed something very annoying.
Mm-hmm.
Is that Fairfax County, they have this annual auto tax that you have to pay.
Oh my.
that
Actually-
I don't know of any other state that does that, to be honest. And I'm assuming that's the reason why the roads are clean, because they repave the roads, very frequently.
Nova is also extremely expensive.
I will say that personal property tax for cars is pretty ridiculous.
Yeah.
It's absurd.
It's really expensive.
Yeah.
Yeah, my mom was shocked. She didn't know there was such.
So I mean, there's a reason why. I mean, I guess they're putting that money to use. Joyce and I were shocked that they were repaving perfectly fine roads one year. Like we said, why are they ripping their road apart? It's like it was fine, but probably excess surplus.
Yeah, and I think like, as many people know, that does speak to like a certain level of affluence in this area. And I don't need to mention, we have like 3 of the counties that have like that rank top 10 in average household median income.
Mhm.
And like Fairfax, Loudoun, even Arlington County, they're in top 10 in the nation. So we know that we do well, just as a region in terms of economically. So, obviously that goes without being said. Anything else to you guys that stands out?
I mean, I will say like I personally am a huge advocate or proponent of Nova. I know that there are a lot of people who grew up in Nova, they want to get out of Nova, but I've already like dug my grave here. Like I'm like Nova for life.
Oh, all right.
But I think the reason I say that, I think something unique about Nova is that like I really do think like you have access to whatever you need. Like it's a very comfortable place to live. To Xiong's point, always in the top 10 list of like median average home income. I think like our school systems are also like in the top list, whatever comes out for that. But with that being said, like I think like whenever I think of Nova, it's just a very cushiony, comfortable place to live. Like you have everything that you could need or want, depending for people what want is for them. But I think in terms of everything you need, like it's here. So I think that's like a positive aspect of Nova. I will say from a Korean American perspective though, like one thing that is pretty unique compared to like other bustling like Korean American populations, whether you say it's like New York, Georgia, LA, Chicago, I'll say that like, everyone says the Korean American community is a small world. Like everyone knows everyone.
Yeah.
You're like 1 degree separated from people, but I would say like it's even more so in Nova.
Yeah.
I would say it's very, very compact. Um, like just with my experiences, like with like churches in Chicago, it's like everyone just did their own thing.
Yeah.
But I remember growing up here, like churches would always do like joint retreats together. Like it was common to do like even like joint like praise nights or revivals together. And I think that just speaks to like how compact
Mm.
like this area is, if that makes sense.
Mm. Yeah, it's like even having lived here for X amount of years, I don't know everyone, but I know of everyone
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Like-
yeah.
somehow. And I think that's the case for a lot of people. It is kind of like a small community in that sense, especially in the Korean American world. Pastor Paul, did you have any other observations
Positive?
or just general uniqueness
I
of
don't know if everyone's sharing such positive things. I mean, why do you invite these people? Just kidding.
We have to start off with the good
Oh,
stuff,
okay.
Pastor
No,
Paul.
okay, I'm just joking. I had a good first impression of Northern Virginia because I came from Philly, and Philly has its own charm. But first thing I noticed, besides the roads, right, the people were very pleasant and nice, right, noticeably compared to
Mm.
Philly people in general, because people in Philly, they're known for their sort of blue collar tough mentality, as a kind of in your face, I'm going to keep it real approach to life, which David Kwan loves, by the way. But sometimes it means they lack basic etiquette
Mm.
and they speak too quickly without thinking, and they can be perceived as very rude at times. And that it was refreshing for me to come to Nova initially and get different treatment. Generally speaking, I would say that if people in Philly don't like you, you will know right away. It's
Mm.
very hot and cold with them. And like if you don't support their local sports teams, you really won't be okay with a lot of people there. But with Northern Virginians, you won't be sure of what people think of you, really,
Mm.
Mm.
because they usually won't tell you straight up.
Mm.
Right? You'll either hear it secondhand or you'll eventually figure it out because they don't respond to you
Mm.
over the long haul.
Mm.
Right? So
There's like a certain level of like passivity.
I think so. Yeah, in general.
I think that's actually. a
I've
pretty
seen
good
it also in
observation.
ministry. Just something I'm learning along the way as well.
Mm.
Oh wow, that's
So you just like took a very great. You just said Nova people are so nice.
I warned Xiyoung that I'd mix in the positive and the negative every comment I make. So
I mean, we're talking about pros and cons, and so I think we're talking about flip sides of the coin. So I think that's fair. I guess just pressing upon what you had just mentioned, and this is a question for you guys in general. So given just kind of like the characteristics of Nova that we just kind of painted, the affluence, the the cordial nature of people, the comfort, and obviously economically advantageous or well off, so to say. What would you guys perceive to be as challenges to being Christians in Nova? And I think this is kind of like the meat of the question, sort of like the main question of the day. What are some challenges that we would face, and many people in Nova face as being a Christian, given the characteristics?
well, it got serious really quick.
Yeah, it did.
I mean, I'll just say real quick. Ironically, for all the positive things that we could highlight from a material and resource perspective, it does not provide for the best environment, I think, to live a very vibrant spiritual life.
Can you expand upon that? Like, what do you mean by?
No, it was just one statement.
And the mic drop, and you're just gonna leave, right?
Well, I just think, I mean, we all know for anything in life, complacency breeds a certain level of, I don't know, unhealthy behaviors. But I mean, that's like especially true for Christianity and like spirituality, right? I just think like in an environment where like you don't actually materially need God to provide for you,
Mm.
you have no real reason to need God to like be involved in your everyday life.
Because you have everything you need.
I mean, well, yeah, more or less, like whatever that means, right? You, like, people are like pretty comfortable. You might not have everything you need or I mean, everything you want,
Yeah.
but like, I would say most people are pretty content, and wouldn't complain too much about like the material status of their life, right?
Mm.
And so like just in a place where you're physically like comfortable, like you're not going to like God is not always going to be at the top of your mind.
Mm.
Um,
Yeah, I actually feel like, kind of building upon what you said, contentment is actually hard. I would argue, just because, like, if you look at your friends, they're buying the next house
mhm,
or the next car, or
Mhm.
they got that next job at, wherever.
mhm,
And so even though I'm doing well, like by like the average standards
Mhm.
across US, I have felt this too. It's like, oh man, like so and so it just got much better thing or better job or
mhm,
whatever.
mhm,
So it's like we do well, and yet it still feels like something's lacking in that, because we're kind of comparing.
Mhm.
It's so easy because everyone does so well. You know what I
Yeah,
mean?
yeah,
So
yeah.
even though I'm doing decent and well for myself, it always feels like something's like missing. You know what I mean?
I mean, it definitely, I don't know if people would ever say this, but I definitely think there's like a subliminal, like keeping up with the Joneses thing,
Yeah.
like going on in Nova for sure. I think there's like a very like image, even if people will never say it, like explicitly, there is this very much, kind of like putting forth an image of always having a certain, I don't know, status
Mhm.
or like, career, job,
Yeah.
home, even like family.
Mm.
It's like you've kind of made it if you have that single family home, two kids,
Yeah.
whatever, like
Yep.
secure corporate job, and I
You have
think
to have 5 kids, by the way.
Oh
Just let
my
you know.
goodness.
Woo.
5 kids, okay?
it's keeping up with the bangs, not keeping up with the
Yeah.
Joneses.
Yeah. We gotta change that. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. No, I agree. How about you, Pastor Paul or Davina? What are some challenges?
It's I don't think a lot of people like what I say. But, if you look at the affluence factor, I think much of it's just fueled by the government pumping money into the system. It's a very government dependent region.
Yeah.
The reason why the economy is relatively stable compared to other locales or, states, cities is because the government's right here, right? There's
A lot of
so many
contracts.
government dependent jobs. And as you know, the government just prints money when they want to. So it's like, I think a lot of the affluence is somewhat artificial because, like, what do Northern Virginians really produce? You ask them what their jobs are, like government consulting. What does that mean? So what do you actually do? IT consultants? Oh, okay. Um,
Oh my. We have a lot of IT consultants at our
I
church,
know.
Pastor
So,
Paul.
like I said, I warned you. Like, I'm just saying. My point is this: because it's such a government dependent area, your God, whether you want to admit it or not, it tends to become that entity that provides you with all your goods, your comforts,
Mm.
right? Your money, your job. I think that's the one of the major obstacles of living a vibrant Christian life here. Because, yeah, I mean, I felt it through COVID, especially. People, they idolize the government, right? They might not use that term, but whatever the government says, they will do because they are so government dependent.
Mm.
And I think that's a major stumbling block.
Mm.
Right.
Yeah. That is a very interesting.
It's your
point.
it's your livelihood, and
Yeah.
I'm not demonizing government, but I think that there has to be a recognition that this can become truly an idol that prevents you from seeing things clearly as you ought to.
Mm. Mm.
So would you say that the dependence is on, I mean, I guess, yeah, like ultimately the dependence is on the government in this area, but then it's like the fruit of what it produces, right? It's like, as Han was mentioning, it's the comfort that it produces, and that like therefore we live in an affluent area because of like the average household income that is made in the area.
Well, in a sense, well, I don't know what comes first, but because if you, let's say, typical college grad in this area, what kind of job do they want? Normally, they want something government related, right? Because that offers the best security in the long run.
Mm-hmm.
It offers the best pension, and so that's what they're hoping to get. And so immediately, like if you push back against the government, like if they themselves have any sort of reluctance toward the government, they're at a disadvantage automatically. And so in that sense, I think it kind of creates this unhealthy dynamic.
Mm.
And government's essential. I'm not anti-government. It's just I just been realizing, observing that people here they're just okay with the government having a whole lot more authority than it should in their lives.
Mm.
So, I guess what are some of the spiritual fruit, the unhealthy fruit, so to speak, that's born out of, the sort of affluence and dependence. I mean, Han touched on it a little bit, but what do we observe spiritually? How do people struggle as Christians, like living as Christians, attending church in Nova? What are some common, I guess, maladies that we see?
Well, I think for me, I kind of can think of it pretty simply, and it's that like when we ask Jesus to save us from our sins, right? Like we're asking Jesus to save us from something,
Mm.
from our sin. And I mean, yeah, so unfortunately, as nice and comfortable as Nova is, what comes with that is comfort. Like you have everything that you want, you have everything that you need. I mean, generally speaking, in the area. And so I feel like as time continues to go on, as we get older and become more established with our finances and even our lifestyle here, because like as Han was mentioning, like we have everything that we need here, even like recreationally. What if we're filling our lives every day with all the things that we want to do, which we can achieve very easily, then practically and spiritually speaking, there kind of is no need for a savior. And I feel like that is the most dangerous thing about living in a place like Nova.
Mm-hmm.
I agree.
Yeah, I agree. And to be clear, I love all the IT workers. I was just trying to make a larger point there. Okay, so I don't want to.
No, you make sense,
I don't
Pastor
want to get
Paul.
any hate mail, please. I'm already tired as it is. So.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, that affluence. I think it's a common, problem of humanity. it's it's hard for rich people, right, to enter into the kingdom for those reasons, and I think we have to do our part to make sure we remember the poor. That's why that instruction is given to Christians,
Mm.
because we can become so blinded by what money can offer us, right? And we can become delusional, thinking that hey, this world is all I need, and we become so short-sighted. And so that's essentially money idolatry. And it's not that we love money, but it's just like we love what money can offer us in the end, right? And so that becomes a god, and we become ensnared, and so there has to be recognition. And I would just encourage people to be intentional about exposing themselves. I love what Pastor Andrew does. Therefore, he's doing his part to stay grounded and interact with people who are less fortunate financially. I think it just helps them keep that perspective of what's most important in this life.
I think with one of the byproducts of like just being comfortable and the whole affluence thing, I don't know if this is like a direct byproduct, but definitely one thing that I've noticed about Christianity in Nova, just like specifically in the Korean American context, because that's all I know. Yeah, I think about like what happened before, the flood in Genesis, right? Like in the days of Noah, people were just so like tunnel visioned into like pursuing pleasure and like their own thing. Like they were eating, drinking, marrying off, whatever, whatever. And I think like somewhere also in the New Testament it's described that like in those days, like their hearts will grow cold, like they'll just be so invested in seeking pleasure, like eating, drinking, just marrying off, whatever, whatever, like in the days of Noah. Um, and I kind of see that like in the modern day Korean American Nova Church. I think people. So to kind of to take a step back, this thought was proposed to me by Pastor Mike Park, who we all know very well. He's very closely partnered with our church, and we've seen him guest speak a few times. But he said this to me about 10 years ago, and I think it rings even more true now, 10 years later, where he said what he identifies as one of the biggest kind of problems or ailments with Nova church spirituality is this idea of like licentiousness. And for people that don't know what that means, I mean, I don't even really know what that means, but what I think it means is that what I think it means is that you feel the license to just do whatever you want. And I think something that we struggle with our spirituality here, and I am so guilty of this as well. I'll be the first one to say that, is that like we want to do everything that we want to do at church. Like we'll be as involved as we want to be. Like we'll even serve. We'll even be in leadership positions. We'll be at the front lines of church service and whatnot. And yet, like Monday through Saturday, we'll still do everything else that we want to do, like with our lives. And I think a particular issue or area that comes to mind is I think there is like a drinking problem in Nova Christian Church, Korean American Church context, or that scene, and it's just like we, for whatever reason, like we just indulge in like whatever behaviors we want to, whether sinful or not, but then still are so involved at church at the same time. It's this crazy paradox of like we indulge in all the sins that we want to indulge in, and yet on Sundays it's like not calling out Deacon James. Do we even have a Deacon James at our church? I'm just saying. I'm just saying a name.
We do.
Oh, we do. Oh.
Apologies.
James
Apologies.
Kang.
Edit this out.
Apologies.
Except he's
Just throwing out a random name. It's like, but then it's like, oh, there's Deacon James on Sunday, but then on Saturday night he was like at con or something. Like you know what I mean? It's like,
yeah.
but it's like we've become so accustomed to that imagery that we don't even think twice about, oh, is that okay? Like it's like we've become so numb and desensitized to that.
What's con?
And- oh, it's like a
It's a bar.
Korean
Yeah.
bar.
In Centerville.
It's across
Well,
where you
no,
live.
there's one
Oh,
in Annandale
yeah.
too.
yeah.
I don't know how I know that.
I was just
Mm-hmm.
because you've been there.
I actually haven't. But
No, but I just think it's, I don't know what to do about that. I've been very much guilty of the same things. But
Okay.
yeah, it's like,
To be clear, in case we have confused listeners, we're not against drinking per se, but just excessive drinking. The Bible says that we ought not to get drunk, but we're not. If you drink some alcohol, then you are sinning.
Yeah.
We're not
Yeah.
teaching that. So
But I mean, that goes without saying. Like
Yeah.
weddings, that's very common.
I think what Han's pointing out is there's often excessive drinking.
Yeah.
yeah. I looked up licentiousness on Bible Gateway, and it says it's a disregard of accepted moral rules and standards, lack of moral restraint, dissoluteness, lasciviousness. Why do they put another big word in the definition?
It's just immoral living, essentially.
Okay.
Loose
Yeah.
immoral living.
I mean, do you guys agree? Like, I Like, is that what you see as well? Or you notice?
What did Han just share again?
Yeah, sorry. I just said a
No,
lot
it like
there.
are you saying that people generally don't like they don't like turn ahead if they see something like
Yeah,
Deacon
yeah.
James drinking the night before and going to church?
Yeah, okay, yeah. Just to make a couple qualifications here. I personally am not against drinking. I do enjoy drinking and I have drunk in excess before, like I confess. Um but I was just using that as an example
Yeah.
of like licentious behavior, and what I was trying to get at was that like as long as like we're involved in church, like we don't really blink twice at like sinful behavior in our lives. Like we just accommodate. Like we try to have both like coexist.
Mm.
Like super involvement in church coexisting with like um ongoing sinful behavior that like any like honestly like normal Christian would just look at that and be like, hey, that's kind of not right, but we don't even think twice about it anymore. We've just accepted it as like normal behavior.
Do you think that it kind of ties with how, as I was sharing earlier, and you too, Han, how because we live in such affluence where everything that we need and want is like at our fingertips, that as I said, as we get older and we continue to indulge in these things that draws our hearts, that when it comes to even sin, that's a lot easier to kind of not pass up. Wait, is that right? Did I say that right? Does that make sense though, you guys? Like, is it the lifestyle of kind of like where we are that really doesn't help when it comes to like living a holy life?
I don't know. What do you think, Pastor Paul?
I think you raise a legitimate point. I think actually that the problem gets worse in more affluent areas because money, it implies power, right? And so when you're dealing with, I guess thinking about the church context, let's say, and I don't have anybody in mind, but theoretically, let's say Deacon James.
I'm so sorry, James. So
Sorry, James
so
King, it's not you.
sorry.
Oh no,
It's Han's fault.
it's my fault.
Okay, let's pick on someone else. Let's say just a officer in the church becomes really rich. I mean, like multi-millionaire level rich. Okay, it's gonna be very hard, like much harder for members or leaders in the church to call that person out for his or her sin.
Mm.
Okay? I mean, our context is gonna be his sin because we don't ordain women officers, right?
Mhm.
True.
And so I think that's the danger of affluence, and you see this everywhere, right? I mean, the reason why rich people they get less penalty or less imprisonment or whatever, it's often they just kind of let go, free of any consequence. It's because of the power they have in society, right? And so yeah, I mean, I can see that play out. And when you're that rich, you feel like invincible anyway. It's like,
Mhm.
like that plays into that you can do whatever you want to. That's human nature. So I think that is definitely a problem.
Yeah, I feel like there's because we have excess, right? I think it's almost like, oh, we put X amount into savings, and yet we still have like money to disposable income, right?
Mhm.
And that allows us to sort of like indulge in whether I think Pastor Paul talked about like sports gambling a couple of weeks ago. That was like a huge topic, huge revelation. And drinking and just indulging in whatever pleasures we have the means to do it. So I think the affluence lends itself to a lifestyle that allows for these kinds of struggles, so to speak. And yeah, I mean, I agree. Like, we have to admit many of us do relatively well, career wise, and
Did you just downgrade your career, Shio?
I upgraded.
Oh, you upgraded. Okay.
Spiritually.
Upgraded.
Spiritually upgraded.
Yeah, now my treasure's in heaven, truly.
And everyone knows your salary now.
Ooh.
Yeah, everyone does know my salary now. But yeah, I felt that pressure too. And that kind of pull. It's like, oh, like we, do well. And wow, I'm earning a lot more money than I ever thought, would have imagined. And so it's like, not that I've indulged necessarily, but it's like I have the means to do it. So I can totally kind of see the pressure, and just like the attraction to that kind of lifestyle. And so I guess the question is like, how do we challenge that? Like how do we, I guess, help each other in this struggle? How can we encourage others? Because whether we like it or not, that this is going to be, it's not like people are going to quit their jobs and take less paying jobs. No, that's not the case. We will continue to live as is. How can we encourage our brothers and sisters who may be struggling with these things?
Or even how could we address helping people even recognize that they're in that?
Yeah. Any thoughts?
Well, I mean, that's why we're in ministry, right, Pastor Shiong? We believe that the gospel has the power to transform hearts and lives, and I think that's the beginning, right? And we need to also exemplify that lifestyle.
Yeah.
Even though it's hard, even for us.
Yeah.
Okay. And so I think like in our context, what I want to practically help people with, and I think Davina has been on my case with this, is the home builders, right? For instance, and let's get practical here, right? Home builders, because the cost of living is so high, every parent feels like they need to be working, and so they rely on their 2-income household, and they find it virtually impossible to live off one income. So in the meantime, their kids, what do? They just entrust them to, government-run schools, and they feel stuck. I think many of them do feel stuck, and they've considered other alternative schoolings, but it's just something they can't afford long term. So what do you do? I mean, I think that's one of the downsides of living in such a place where the cost of living is so high. It kind of enslaves families in that way. But can there be an alternative? I think people they need to be deliberate about budgeting, obviously, and living on, I guess, lesser means.
Yeah.
And prioritizing how they want to live as Christians. And if they really have a heart for the next generation, I think they will, especially in this culture we're living in now, the way things are. And I do hope things will get better in the schools, but every teacher I've spoken to recently has said it's gotten worse. So I think it'll get worse before it gets better. And I guess I have to clarify. I'm not saying that you must, pull your kids out of public school, but I think in many cases, depending on their age, like if you have the means, that's something you should definitely explore. So I'll leave it at that. But I think people do need practical help, and I think as church leadership, we have to figure out ways we can guide them and direct them.
Yeah. How about you guys?
How about... Okay, so I'm going to throw something out there, and I just thought of this, and it's probably not original. It came from somewhere, but actually, it might have even been you, Pastor Paul, that spoke about this. I don't know. I've been with you for so long at this point, but I feel like practically maybe even to look at your bank account.
Oh my!
Your own account, not others' account.
Your own account.
That probably wasn't me. What? Own account of what? What do you want to say?
Tithes 25%. Just kidding.
Huh?
Looking at your own account and seeing, I guess, where everything goes. You know how like they have those apps now, like Mint or Intuit or something like that,
Yeah.
where you can see exactly how much you spend in like what areas of your life.
Yeah.
I feel like practically that might be something good to see if like I don't know. I mean, not to be a total gauge on like your
Mm.
life, but maybe see where you kind of lean on
Okay,
with your own
we'll
finances.
consider that next time.
Yeah.
I'm not saying to instill it as a church thing. It's just I'm trying to think of something practical.
Yeah.
Yeah, like in terms of prioritizing, right? Like
Yeah.
see where your money's going, just in general.
Well, I mean, I think that's a healthy practice for people to do, right?
Yeah.
We're not going to ask them to reveal their bank statements.
No, I'm not asking anyone to reveal anything.
Okay.
No, she's saying as individuals,
As a practice.
yeah, as a practice, look at your.
Oh, okay. If that's what you're saying, then that's fine.
Oh my goodness,
Yeah,
Pastor
no, she's
Paul.
not
Can
saying-
you listen to me
I don't
sometimes
know.
too?
I don't know. I mean, you can be radical sometimes. You know,
Yeah.
all that cult involvement.
All right, we going there.
So, what do you want to take this now?
No. So, how about Johan? Did you have any thoughts on how to
Um,
help our brothers and sisters?
I don't know. Like it's something that I struggle with as well, and that's why I bring it up. Like I'm not like um I think there are a lot of practical things that we could try to do that would affect the surface and like, almost like a behavior modification type of thing, but I think we all know that that only goes so far, right? And I mean, I don't want to sound crazy right now, but I think like I've always been like a huge like revival person. Like revival is something that's very close to my heart.
Mm.
And I've been yearning for revival in Nova for
Mm.
some time now.
Let's go.
Because
Yeah.
I've caught the tail ends of it, glimpses of the tail ends of it when I was growing up in youth group, and we saw so many people come out of
Mm.
this so-called revival that happened in Nova in the early 90s, 80s, right? So many people were called to ministry out of that. We had, and like both good and bad parts of it as well. Like a lot of maybe not grounded passion, but there's a lot of passion as well. But I just think yeah, like the only thing that could change that, the only thing that could make someone realize, oh man, like this is not honoring to God, or this is just not good before God, is like for that person to be met by God and be radically be changed by God. But how does that happen, right? I mean, we could point to a lot of practical things, read the word, like pray, or have people pray for you, or like go to church more, like et cetera, et cetera. But I don't know. There's like a yearning on my heart for like a outpouring of God's grace to be upon this area, and to just like wake people up in a supernatural way
Mm.
that cannot be accomplished other than through God's own hand. And I think that's when people will wake up, and then we'll have a true revival of repentance, of people actually seeing sin for what it is, being broken by it, then being enamored by like the glories of like God's love for them in the face of that. And then that then changes like a heart to really then like live in a different way, to reprioritize like their time, resources, what they love, what they pursue and stuff like that. But
Well, you must have been a pastor in your previous life.
Yeah, that's what it
Yeah,
sounds like.
were you?
yeah, I don't know. That person died some time ago.
Yeah, you sound like a preacher there.
I don't think
Yeah.
so.
No, that was good because I think practical, advices are very important and valuable. But yeah, it is ultimately a spiritual issue at hand.
I think so. Yeah.
So, yeah, and I think we're all in agreement that ultimately it is the work of God that's needed, and I think part of like what hopefully we're envisioning even for our church in sort of trying to execute this spring revival. I do hope that we can serve. It can serve as a wake up call for many of us. Not just in our church, but we're also opening it up to people outside the church as well. So, kind kind of like rediscovering love for God's word
Mm.
and a recommitment to the Lord.
Mhm.
And I think, revival is always paired with good preaching, just God's word being proclaimed,
Mhm.
and people really being convicted and coming to repentance and recommitting their lives to living for Him. So, no, I think that's a really good, good point that we hopefully all of us will want to see on this area. So, no, thanks for sharing
Yeah,
that.
one practical tool that I think we should mention is the principle of tithing, right?
Mm.
That's something that
Mm.
I think God asks us to do in order to temper our idolatry of money.
Mm.
Right? So we try to shave off, or we ought to shave off our first 10%. And I'm not saying you need to give it to all of it to the church. If you have another organization you want to support, that's up to you. But I think it's good discipline. I know it's good discipline for you to have. So you
Yeah.
make a certain amount, and you give 10% away to the Lord and for the work of ministry, and that forces you to live off the 90%. Okay,
Mm.
and that automatically puts you at a lower tier of income than the other people you're trying to chase after. And so
Mm.
it has a humbling effect, and it causes you to budget better and be more prudent with your finances.
Mm.
It reminds you that you're a steward of your money, not the owner of it. Right? That's the primary lesson.
So I guess, we talked plenty about kind of like the negative aspects and the struggles. But I guess I want to pose this question. How can we turn, like the characteristics of Nova into like a strength? Like what are some of the potentials, that we see as Christians living in Nova? What are kind of like the positive, impact that we can potentially make, given whatever the affluence or whatever we have. I guess I'm trying to really turn this into
the
like a pro
obvious,
as
the
well.
obvious one obvious answer is we're called to leverage our resources and release it for kingdom work. And it's one thing that we can easily do. Giving money to missionaries or orphanages in Indonesia. It's not a hard thing for us to do.
Yeah.
Because there is, at least in our experience, there's always been a surplus, and missionaries and Lizda in Indonesia, they count on us
Mm.
to provide the financial means for them to do the work they do. And I think we should be. I'm not saying that money solves all problems. Definitely doesn't. Sometimes it actually causes more problems. But there are these basic needs that our missionaries have, and so I think we have demonstrated that through our generosity, people have been blessed right, over the world, all around the world.
Any other thoughts on that?
I think simply if I were to even just think of what third world countries have to go through, especially persecuted countries, another I feel like very maybe obvious thing is that in Nova we're able to meet and we have the resources to grow. Kind of going back to having the money to be able to get whatever we want. Like with that money, we have the internet, and Amazon is like tomorrow, sometimes same day, where we can purchase books and have the freedom to not only study God's word better, but also use those things to meet regularly and grow together. So I feel like, and especially like as Han was mentioning too. Han, by the way, I love the way you talk. You should come on these shows more
Yeah.
often. Han, you were mentioning earlier how Nova feels extra compact, and I feel like Korean Americans in this area in general, we tend to even live closer to each other.
Mhm.
And I feel like the proximity of each other, that could also be of benefit when it comes to really being there for one another as believers.
Mm.
whether we go to the same church or not. So I feel like that's an advantage too.
I didn't think about that one. How about you, Han? Do you have any thoughts on?
I guess like as a point of encouragement, I will say like, you know, it says in the word, I think it's in like one of the Kings or something like that, where it says like the Lord searches to and fro for hearts that are like looking for Him.
Mm.
And I will say like I am encouraged because even as I point out these things about Nova spirituality that are kind of negative and quite honestly need to be addressed sooner than later, is what I found is that in almost any community that I've been a part of, ministry church in the Nova area, that there are genuine people who want to seek the Lord, and they want to try, and they want to like go after it. And I think like we just gotta fan that flame as much as we can, because there are people out there that are wanting more and that want to pursue, and it would be unfair to just wrap up everyone into one categorization and say like, oh, all of Nova is just like this. But I think I've met very genuine people at KPCW as well, at Cornerstone, where I'm like, oh wow, like I didn't think you to be this way, but after having a brief conversation with you, it's like there's something there. There's a flame or ember there that can be fanned. So yeah, I think the hope is that there are people, whether it be far and few or even in larger groups, where it's like there are people who really actually do want to live a meaningful life for God and they want to go after it. So I think we can't discount that fact either.
I really like that. Actually, that is an encouragement that even amidst the affluence of Nova, God is still moving.
Yeah.
And we have experienced it through testimonies within our own church even recently.
Mm-hmm.
And so I think that God is way bigger than the struggles
Mm-hmm.
that we have even in a first world country.
Mm-hmm.
And actually, that's very encouraging.
Yeah, no, that's good. And I think my personal encouragement, because many of us work in the corporate world, it is kind of easy, I would say, to be kind of insulated in the Korean American church context, to the point where you don't really interact with your coworkers. It's like very compartmentalized life. But I feel like there's so much potential for us to be commissioned into the workplaces where there are people who don't know the Lord, and they're very much wrapped up in this, licentious lifestyle, without being challenged or knowing that there is so much more to life than living for your own pleasure. And so, as we're hoping for like a revival, just even within the church, there's, I think, so much potential for many of us to go out and I've said this before, like befriend people, your coworkers, your fellow students, and build relationships where they'll come to know the Lord, and hopefully you can really present the gospel. There's so much opportunity, and many of us are just, embedded in so many different companies, and it's from an evangelistic perspective, I think we're in very good places to do so. And I think it's just hopefully we can get out of sort of our comfort zones of just the Korean American context and learn to just befriend those who are, different, and even talk to, just make conversations with coworkers and see where that takes you. And that's something that I've personally learned from my corporate world. If you, work hard and people will recognize that, and I think people will be drawn to you in some ways, if you do show excellence in some ways. And I think I've had many great opportunities just to talk to coworkers and just kind of share life. And, many of them also know that I'm transitioning to being a pastor. And
Transitioning, or you transition?
Or I transition. Sorry, I keep thinking I'm still working. can't take the corporate out of me yet. But yeah, and I think they were very encouraged and just like, wow, like that's a big change, and they themselves were encouraged, and stuff like that. I hope that we can leverage just our faith and into infuse it into our workplace. So that's my encouragement, along with all the other ones. So I think that really brings it to the end of our discussion today. So just want to thank you guys for your insight, your encouragements, and your heart for Nova and the church and Christians in Nova. As we come to the end of this episode of Living Stones, we hope that you were encouraged and challenged to live faithfully as believers in Northern Virginia. If you found value in today's episode, we encourage you to share with others. Remember that you are not alone in this journey. We are members of God's household, united by a shared faith in the Lord and the desire to grow together. So until next time, may God's grace and peace be with you all. Thank you for being a part of Living Stones.